Shalom and welcome to Reboot the Root. Reboot the Root is all about getting you to rediscover your Hebrew roots, because Christianity evolved from a Hebraic root, and those of us who are in Hebrew roots or who are considered Messianic or Torah keepers, we have been on a recorrected journey to find out where did we go wrong in our theology and our doctrines, and we're resetting our ideas and our doctrines and theology to be more biblically correct. So we are rebooting our journey to reset some of our ideas that were believed in error. And it's important to know that not everything that we believe or have believed was an error, but we need to take a checklist, an inventory, if you will, to find out what theologies do we have that are man-made doctrines. The doctrines and traditions of man, as the book of Matthew teaches us, actually Yeshua teaches us. So we are relearning, our theologies based upon what the Bible teaches us and not what man teaches us. The unfortunate thing is man teaches us from his corrupted viewpoint of what the Bible teaches. And part of the reason for that corruption is because we're trying to understand doctrines and the Bible from an English Western viewpoint. And that just cannot be done. So really, to understand the Bible correctly, we have to have a Hebraic perspective. And we have to understand, what does the Bible teach us from a Hebrew culture, perspective, and language? And so what I'm trying to do with all these series is to get us to understand just that. How do we get back to our Hebraic root? Thus, reboot the root. So thank you for joining me here for episode 5 of Looking for the Antichrist. And so last time we were visiting, we were talking about the Abomination of Desolation, and we were looking at about Daniel's prophecy of what will happen in the coming days, that Yeshua or Jesus talked about what would happen when the Antichrist arrives on the scene. And this is the event of the Abomination of Desolation, when the Antichrist will set up worship in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem and demand worship to him. So the last time we got together, we were talking about a bit of information we got from gotquestions.org, and they were talking about Daniel's prophecies about the Abomination of Desolation seem to have at least had a partial fulfillment in 167 BC, when a Greek ruler by the name of Antiochus IV desecrated the temple in Jerusalem. He set up an altar to Zeus over the altar of burnt offering, and he sacrificed a pig on the altar. So that is indeed what had happened, and we identified that in the other teaching I did called The Lights of Hanukkah. And so you can learn more about that if you want to go watch that series, talking about what Hanukkah is. We also identify of how this Abomination of Desolation actually occurred. So it happened in the past, and as Hebraic understanding dictates, we have a repetition. It is a cyclic event, like a lot of things that happen in the Bible. It happens once and it happens again. So it happened in 167 BC, and it will happen again in the future with the advent of the Antichrist. So actually, if you think about it, Antiochus IV could be seen as a primitive form of the Antichrist, because the things that he did will actually happen again with the Islamic Messiah when they come on the scene, and they want to initiate a forced religion, much like Antiochus IV did. He was a Greek ruler, a Greek Seleucid ruler, that is, that forced Hellenization of Jews there in Jerusalem. And so he is like a precursor. He's a type of the Antichrist that will soon to arrive. So we've already talked about that the Antichrist will make a 7-year covenant, and we see this prophetically in Daniel chapter 9. And it says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, so that's 7 years. He shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Daniel 11 goes on and says, forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation. This is exactly what happened in the Hanukkah story with the Maccabees revolt. Exactly. This is just a repetition of history. So it's very interesting that we can take a look at the Muslim Messiah and the Jewish Messiah, and they share some common ground. I know that may be kind of hard to believe, but it's true, and we're going to take a look at that. The Jewish Messiah will be the one in the same. Jews are looking for a military king whose mother is Jewish. Islam is also looking for a military king whose father is an Ishmaelite. So again, we're seeing the mixing of the chosen child, the child of Isaac, with the bondwoman Ishmael. So they're mixing these two things together. This is why the Muslims will make their fourth and final peace agreement with a high priest. He will be a priest from the lineage of Aaron. The Great Delusion shows us that Mahdi will find scrolls that will tell you that you misunderstood the Bible, and many will be converted to Islam. So to me, there's this great delusion, and it's also a great confusion about there are going to be people who fall for this false Messiah, for the Antichrist, for the Muslim Mahdi, the Messiah. So let's take a look at where this comes from. This is from 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 9 through 12. It says, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness and of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God will send them a strong delusion. That's where we're talking about the lies of the Antichrist that will look like the truth, but it will be a delusion. That they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So we're going to see this thing that's going to be coming, that's going to happen, that's going to come onto the world scene, that's going to be changing times, okay? Changing the worship times, the worship days. Mahdi says everyone will convert to Islam or you will die. And so to understand this, we have to understand that Islam will bring in Muslim laws, which is called Sharia. And so Muslims will have their own laws, meaning they have their own holy days, and they also have their holy day of the week, which will be Friday. So this is interesting. Islam currently, their holy day is Friday. Christianity's holy day is Sunday, and Hebrew or Jewish holy days are Saturdays. So Daniel 7:25 speaks of what I'm just telling you about, how the Muslim takeover in the Antichrist system will bring about the changing of times. It says in Daniel chapter 7 verse 25, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and a dividing of time. So this time and times and dividing of time equals out to 3.5 years. So this false prophet will have an unholy partnership with the Antichrist. The false prophet has an unholy partnership with the Antichrist. In Revelations chapter 13, verses 11 through 14, it says, then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. He exercised all authority of the first beast on his behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. And the false prophet will perform great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men, because of the signs he was giving power to do on behalf of the first beast. The false prophet will come and he will decapitate anyone who is in the faith with Yeshua. Revelations 20 verse 4 says, "And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony for Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or his image and had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands." And so this talks about the mark of the Antichrist that will be forced upon those who will bend the authority to worship the Antichrist. And these will be people who will be given to the Great Delusion. They will be forced to have the mark on their hand and the mark on their forehead. They will also not be able to buy or sell without this mark. Revelations 13:14, "And he deceived with a great deception the inhabitants of the earth." A false prophet will come to give life to a statue which will be the image of the Antichrist. Revelations 13:15, "He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that it could speak and cause all who refuse to worship to be killed." The prophet of Islam is an interesting subject to talk about. Who will be the prophet for the Antichrist? So the prophet of the Muslims is none other than the than the Jesus in the Bible. The prophet, let me rephrase that. The prophet of the Muslims is none other than the Jesus in the Bible. They believe that our Savior, which is Yeshua, Jesus, is their prophet. Unlike our Jesus, their Jesus looks like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. So he's kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. The Muslim Jesus, and referring to the Muslim Jesus that I was just talking to you about, has the power to convert, but if you choose not to, you will be beheaded. Along with the Mahdi, this Muslim Jesus will abolish the jizya tax. And so what is this jizya tax? It is a tax that if you're not a Muslim, you pay a protection tax, and that institutes an Islamic law over all the earth. After the time that the jizya tax is abolished, all the people will embrace Islam and there will be no other alternative. So you kind of see where you're at with the advent of the Islamic takeover of the world. According to this book called Kabani, that is written by Mufti Muhammad Shafi and Mufti Muhammad Rafi, and the book called The Signs of the Qiyamah and the Arrival of the Messiah, it says when Jesus returns, this is their Muslim prophet, he will personally correct the misrepresentations and the misinterpretations about himself. He will affirm the true message that he brought in his time as a prophet, and that he never claimed to be the Son of God. Furthermore, he will reaffirm in his second coming what he prophesied in his first coming, bearing the seal of the messengers, Prophet Muhammad. In his second coming, many non-Muslims will accept Jesus as the servant of Allah, as a Muslim, and as a member of the community of Muhammad. And so again, this comes from Kabani, page 237. From the book Doomsday Portents and Prophecies, we see that it writes, the Muslim Jesus will be judge and executioner. Jesus, the son of Mary, will soon descend among the Muslims as a just judge. Jesus will therefore judge according to the law of Islam. All people will be required to embrace Islam, and there will be no other alternative. So what does the Bible say about all this? Daniel 7 verse 25, we already read about the changing of times. He will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And he will intend to change times and laws. They will be given into his hand for a time times and half a time, and this time times and half a time equal out to 3.5 years. They will institute the Sharia laws and their holy calendar. You will be required to bow down to Mahdi 5 times a day at prayer time, and you will also be required to worship Allah. In the book, The Signs of Qiyamah, it writes, Muslim Jesus is said to be the leader of an army that slaughters tens of thousands of Jews who are all said to be the follower of Dajjal. And if you recall, in the last episode, I defined what the Dajjal hall. It may not have been in the last episode, but one of the last few episodes. The Dajjal is their equivalent of the Antichrist. Jesus will kill the Dajjal at the gate of Hud near an Israeli airport in the valley Afig. The final war between the Jews will ensue and the Muslims will be victorious. So we need to be careful of this time that will come, which will be a great time of false prophets, obviously. So we need to be knowing who this Antichrist is. We need to know who the false prophet is. We need to know what is happening at this very important time, so we will not be confused and we will not be fooled. So we need to know what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7 verse 15. Beware of false prophets which come in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. If you recall just a little while ago, I was saying that this Muslim Jesus, which is their prophet, remember I was saying how he's going to be like a wolf in sheep's clothing? Well, here we are in Matthew 7:15. Jesus, Yeshua, is cautioning us to beware of false prophets. And then in Matthew 24:24, he continues to warn us, saying, For there shall arise Christs and false prophets, and shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that brought them, and bring upon them swift destruction. So we've talked a little bit before about what the spirit of the Antichrist is. So let's revisit that again, so we will be careful to know what does the Antichrist look like. We will know them by the spirit which they bring. So let's return to 1 John chapter 4 verses 2 through 4. By this you will know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses Jesus Christ has come in the flesh of God. So we need to recognize those that come really and truly in the name of God will confess that Jesus Christ, or Yeshua HaMashiach, has come in the flesh from God. So that's important to know, especially when we hear a lot of heresies denying the deity of Christ, denying that Yeshua was God in the flesh, that he came and he dwelt among men. And so if we hear those kind of people, they are coming in the spirit of Antichrist. So continuing on here. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. That is the spirit of the Antichrist, of which you have heard that is coming, and now it is already in the world. So the spirit of the Antichrist has always been with us, even from the time of Jesus. For the last some 2,000 years, we have seen the spirit of Antichrist in the world. 1 John 2:22 tells us that Antichrist is a liar, the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ. This is the Antichrist, the one who denies the Father and the Son. The Muslim Jesus says he's coming to correct the way you interpreted the Bible. He says he's coming to tell you he is just a prophet. He never claimed to be the Son of God, never died and rose from the grave. That he was translated and is now returning to finish his mission. So this Muslim Jesus is here to also let you know that the Mahdi is greater than himself and stands in for Allah on the earth. And you need to worship Allah through the Mahdi. Isn't that good to know? In the book, the Muslim book, 41, it's Sahih Muslim Book 41. It says, according to Islam's sacred traditions, Jesus' return is usually described as taking place just outside of Damascus. At this very time, Allah would send Christ, the son of Mary, and he will descend at the white minaret in the eastern side of Damascus, wearing 2 garments lightly dyed with saffron and placing his hands on the wings of 2 angels. When he would lower his head, there would fall beads of perspiration from his head, and he would raise it up. Beads like pearls would scatter from it. Continue on in the Sahih, the Muslim book. At that time, Jesus descends to meet the army of the Mahdi, which will be preparing for battle. It will be just before the time of prayer. Muslims will still be preparing themselves for the battle, drawing up ranks. The time of prayer shall come, and then Jesus, son of Mary, will descend. Jesus Christ will decline the offer and invitation of Imam Mahdi to come and lead the Muslims in prayer and say his prayer before Mahdi. So let's take a look at this recap of the Muslim Jesus. The Muslim Jesus will return in the last days of Damascus. He will arrive at the time of Mahdi, and his army are getting ready to pray. He will pray behind Mahdi to show he is subordinate. He will destroy anyone who chooses not to convert by beheading them. He will establish Sharia law in all the world, and he will kill the Dajjal, or the Antichrist. So this Muslim Jesus, which is someone who is spoken about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9-10, he is the one who is the lawless one. He is the coming of the lawless one, is according to the working of Satan, with all power and signs and wonders of falsehood, and with all deceit of unrighteousness, in those perishing, because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. This false Muslim Jesus is spoken about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 11 through 12. And for this reason, Elohim sends them a working of delusion for them to believe the falsehood. This is the falsehood of the false Messiah, the Antichrist, in order that they should be judged who do not believe the truth but have delighted in the unrighteousness. So if we can sum up 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 9 through 12, it would sound like this. The Antichrist will be in accordance with the work of Satan, displayed in all kinds of counterfeit miracles, signs and wonders, and in every sort of evil that deceives those who are perishing. They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe a lie and that they will be condemned, so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth but have delighted in wickedness. So we have to look out for this Muslim Jesus, everyone. Look out for this Muslim Jesus, as Jesus told us in Matthew 24, to watch out that none deceive you. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. Jesus is telling us here in Matthew 24, telling us that telling us in this scripture, the false prophet will claim to be himself. But don't be deceived, because he will deceive many, and there will be many that come to deceive. So if we're looking at the Muslim Antichrist, let's take a look at who the Muslims see as their Antichrist. And we're going to get this information from a book called The Approach to Armageddon. It says, in Muslim writings, there is a man who calls himself the Messiah, and his title is called Ad-Dajjal, which means the liar or the deceiver. Usually referred to as the Dajjal. The Dajjal is described as a deceiver who will have miraculous powers and will temporarily hold power over the whole earth. The prophet was writing us in the last days there would be someone who would deceive all humanity. The Dajjal will possess power over this world. Thus, Muslims must be careful not to have the love of this world in their hearts, so they won't leave their religion and follow him. And again, that comes from the book, The Approach to Armageddon. The Approach of Armageddon also continues to tell us about the Muslim Antichrist. He will be able to heal the sick by wiping his hand on them, like Jesus did, but with deceit. The Dajjal will lead people down a path to hell. Thus the Dajjal is the false Messiah or Antichrist. He will pretend to be the Messiah and deceive people by showing amazing powers. Dajjal is said to be blind in one eye with thick hair, and there will be a garden and fire with him, and his fire would be a garden, and his garden would be a fire. So this Dajjal is a very important character in Muslim prophecy, and in the book, the Muslim book 41, the Sahih Muslim book number 41, and this other book called Freemasons and Dajjal, we see it writes, he said to have the word infidel written between his eyes, possibly on his forehead. But this word will only be seen by true Muslims and no one else. The Dajjal is said to have the power of the devil. He will terrorize Muslims and do following, converting them into unbelief. He will conceal truth and will have the power to show images of one's dead ancestors on his hand, kind of like a TV screen. So this comes from Sahih Muslim book 41 and Qamran, Riyadh, Freemasons and Dajjal. Now we get into some very interesting little things about the Dajjal, the Muslim Antichrist. The Dajjal will have a magic mule. The Dajjal will travel on a magic mule with great speeds, and his means of conveyance will be a giant mule. He will travel the entire world. The Dajjal will not be able to enter 3 cities, and that is Mecca, Medina, and Damascus. And so this comes from the book Signs of Qiyamah and the book Al-Dajjal and the Antichrist. In the Muslim book number 41, and from an excerpt from a Islamic sermon delivered by Palestinian Imam Shaki Ibrahim, we see the Dajjal will be the Jewish Messiah, while we await for Allah's help. The Mahdi and the Muslim Jesus, peace be upon them. Jesus' pure hands will murder the false Jewish Messiah, where in the city of Lod in Palestine. Palestine will be as it was in the past, a graveyard of invaders. Muslim Jesus will be the one who kills the false Jesus Messiah. And this comes from the Muslim book 41, an excerpt from an Islamic sermon from Palestinian Imam Sheikh Ibrahim. So we see that there's this connection between the Muslim and the Jewish Messiah, where the Jews are looking for a military king whose mother is Jewish, and the Muslims are looking for a military king whose father is Muslim. This could be the way the Jews accept him, whereas the Mahdi as the Messiah down the line. Well, I think this is a good place to stop here for episode 5 of Looking for the Antichrist. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Looking for the Antichrist. I invite you to come back for episode 6. We'll continue to look for who the Antichrist is in the Islamic Messiah of Mahdi. And so this is Reboot the Root saying shalom, and invite you back next time as we continue to reboot the root. Shalom.